In March 2011, Viviane Reding, the European Union's Justice Commissioner, requested all publicly listed firms in the EU to sign a pledge to increase the number of women on their boards to 30% by 2015 and 40% by 2020. And Reding warned, if there's no significant progress within a year, you can count on my regulatory creativity. The Economist reports that till March 2012, a year since Reding issued her warning, only 24 firms have taken the pledge to voluntarily increase the number of women on their boards. This number didn't impress Reding, and so her regulatory creativity is now upon the EU. A legislative proposal is now being drafted by the Commission to force listed companies in the EU to either reserve at least 40% of their non-executive director board seats by 2020 for women or face fines and sanctions. 9 nations, including the UK, have written to Reding opposing compulsory quotas. And quotas are something Reding herself views quite paradoxically. She says, and I quote, "I don't like quotas, but I like what quotas do," unquote. And here perhaps Reding is referring to the transformation that quotas have brought about in Norway. Now, Norway introduced quotas for women on boards over a decade ago, and this has catapulted the share of women in board positions from 9% in 2003 to the required 40% in 2012. In the last couple of years, France, Italy, Spain, Belgium, the Netherlands, all of these countries have actually introduced quotas, and the debate is hot in Germany to also go the quota way. But critics of a quota regime say that there is little value that these mandates bring, often reducing the entire effort to tokenism. And here they go back again to quoting the Norway example. Skeptics say that less experienced women have been appointed on boards to meet targets, and that a group of 70 well-qualified women, referred to as the golden skirts, have seats on over 300 boards. Now, these may be subjective opinions, but the numbers are damning. Today, companies in Norway might have 40% women on their boards, but only 4.6% women chief executives, and this number has barely changed in a decade. The contention then is that women on boards make little difference to developing the pipeline of women in an organization. In India, the new companies will propose the reservation of at least 1 seat on the board of directors for women. We asked business leaders in India what they thought of quotas.
Just because you have a quota or a reservation, you cannot suddenly produce superlative women managers or any segment of managers for that matter. So I personally don't believe in quotas.
I don't believe that a quota thinking is the right way to go about this. In fact, in some ways it can defeat the purpose.
I'm a very big believer in self-selection. I don't believe in creating an artificial environment to prove something that is not to be. So if a woman wants to get to the top, even under the current circumstance, she can get to the top.
Tell a woman that, look, you've been promoted or you got this position only because of a reservation and because we have to give it to women and not because you're deserving it, I think is extremely demeaning and insulting. And I don't think anybody would want that. So I don't believe in reservations at the workplace. However, in terms of board positions, I think it is perhaps some level of affirmative action is essential in the beginning, only to manage the change and introduce the change in culture.
Today, Aruna Jayanti, CEO of Capgemini India, is one of the only 5 women heading operations at some of the largest IT companies in India. Devjani Ghosh of Intel, Neelam Dhawan of HP, Accenture's Rekha Menon and Kritika Reddy of Facebook are the other 4.
Given that in India, I think it's something like 15% female participation at middle management and 10% at senior management in the workforce. It's obviously not that easy to find diverse people at those levels. In certain areas, it's obviously much more difficult to find women because, when you look at that pipeline at entry level, there weren't so many women candidates. So when you look at more technical areas, fewer women opt for technical education, and as a result, obviously, there's probably a very big shortage of women in those sort of technical areas.
But in spite of this, the number of women employed in the IT and IT services industries in India has overtaken the percentage of women employed in traditional sectors like manufacturing.
A lot of these sectors which have really taken off in the last couple of years has seen that women are the right fitment for the job because of because of the kind of innovation and creative practices that women can bring to the table. Two is purely by way of the kind of hard work, the focused energies that is required when you are dealing in a service sector that has a certain customer or a client interfacing. So it's really more of the new age industries that have seen women take off than I would say the traditional ones. There is still some level of I would say discrimination or a certain thought culture to it which has probably not pushed the women up to those echelons in the traditional sectors.
So thought barriers and stereotypes are not the problem in this industry, just finding enough women is. And Jayanti believes that companies can overcome this shortage by hiring aggressively.
One of the biggest challenges for the industry is talent. I mean, truly there is a war for talent in this industry, and whoever grabs the best will do the best. If you look at engineering colleges today, 1/3 of the population roughly is female, and we have to make sure that we get that or a little more than that. In fact, I insist that we try and get 50% of our entry level at grads that are female. I think we don't do 50. I think we are closer to perhaps 45, but I think we will get there soon.
And Capgemini is not the only one on a hiring spree this season. IBM India hired over 50% women this year, SAP Labs India 42%, Cisco about 22%. And these numbers are significantly better than recruitment figures a few years ago. The next step then, after bringing in this talent, is developing and retaining it. And here Jayanti sees human resources or HR as an important line function for every manager.
Essentially, the capital that we are dealing with is human capital, and that's the most important asset that we have. And therefore, it is not somebody sitting in a remote corner, HR team looking at it. Every single business leader needs to look at how he's going to motivate his people, how he's going to train them, how he's going to groom them, and how he's going to get the best out of them. So, to me, it is an absolute line function, the way that I see it, and most managers are incentivized on how they perform on HR and people management related aspects.
The problem for companies in the sector is to keep the job engaging and challenging, regularly to provide growth opportunities laterally and vertically within the organization, and equally important is to create a work culture that doesn't put women on the defensive.
I have to admit I went through that too. And when I was expecting, and I went and told my boss, hey, look, I have a problem. And then he turned to me and said, look, what do you mean you have a problem? Congratulations, and take some time off, come back and continue. And I think that made me realize that if you take a longer term view of career, let's say you want a woman to work for 10 years, 15 years or 20 years, what is a 3-month break or a 4-month break? It's nothing. And if we start to get worried about that 3-month break for maternity, I think it's really a case of missing the wood for the trees.
And one IT major is definitely not missing the woods for the trees. That's IBM. We'll take a look at what IBM is doing to hire and retain female talent. But that's on the other side of this short break. Stay tuned. You're watching What Women Really Want. On the 1st of January 2012, when Ginny Rometty took over as the CEO of the Big Blue, she was the first woman to occupy the corner suite at IBM in its over 100-year history. An IBM lifer, Rometty has literally worked her way up the organization over the last 31 years to manage the 5th largest corporation in the world by valuation, with a market cap of $235 billion. Outgoing IBM CEO Sam Parmisano said of Rometty's appointment, and I quote, "Ginny got it because she deserved it. It's got zero to do with progressive social policies," unquote. But that's not to say that IBM does not have progressive social policies. It was one of the first few companies in the US to hire women engineers way back in 1935. It also decided not to segregate its black workforce. So in a sense, IBM has had a culture of fostering diversity and nurturing talent. Today, 33% of the senior leadership at IBM comprises women. Of its 400,000 employees globally, women make up 29%, and in India, the number stands at 26%. This year, majority of the new hires at IBM India were women.
I really think it's a reflection of, the fact that we are a very strong brand in the marketplace for women, period. Both laterally as well as, women coming in from the universities. In IBM globally and in India, we work with schools and colleges targeting, women to actually look at careers in, science and technology eventually. We have something very specific called Excite, which is exploring interests in technology and engineering careers, which is targeted at women in grade 9, or rather girls in grade 9. We work through our partner communities, through our HR organizations, and through our women leaders themselves who partake in these Excite camps.
And while work flexibility has been part of the IBM culture for many years now and has actually been a market differentiator for the company as far as mid-level recruitments are concerned, Kalpana says at the entry level, what matters most is the content of the work on offer.
It's often said that IBM is like a little ecosystem onto itself. You can, if you want to pursue business leadership, you have a number of programs for you. If you want to do sales, you have sales, and then if you want to do hardcore technology careers, and there are opportunities available for you as well. And again, what governs this whole mechanism of women and putting them through different programs is a body called the India Women's Leadership Council. This sits outside the talent or the traditional talent or the HR organization, and the India Women's Leadership Council is a group of about 27-28 women, very senior women, who are drawn from the different business units that make up IBM, and they actually year upon year take responsibility for designing and crafting some of these programs.
Sales Elan is one of IBM India's latest initiatives to draw women to the sales team, which traditionally has had a skewed sex ratio.
Traditionally, we've seen IT companies look to the market, look outside, of the organization to attract women to sales force. What we've seen in IBM is that we have a huge expertise in the core domain of technology, and if all of these, skills of women were leveraged, we would make very fine sales leaders out of them.
I've been with IBM for 10 years now, and I've been with human resources mostly. And sales profession is something that's been of interest to me throughout, but didn't know if there was such a chance available. So this program that IBM has just launched is something that is kind of a beginning step towards it, I would think.
And given that it was a sales job with which Ginny Rometty started her career at IBM, it might result in a lucrative second innings for at least some of the women who decide to give it a go. Now, from one of the tech world's oldest giants, let's look at what one of the new age majors is doing. Here's what the search for women at Google threw up. Women make up about 1/3 of Google's 34,300 employees globally. Now, this might be a respectable figure by industry standards, but Google wanted to do more. So in a very Google-like style, an algorithm was created to pinpoint exactly when and where the company lost women. A 2012 article published in the New York Times lists some of the findings. The spreadsheets showed that some women who applied for jobs did not make it past the phone interview. The reason? Women did not flaunt their achievements. Google now asks interviewers to report candidates' answers in more detail. Google also found that women who turned down job offers had interviewed only with men. So now a woman interviewing at Google meets other women during the hiring process. The Google spreadsheet also found that once hired, women in technical positions were not being promoted at the same rate as men. At Google, employees nominate themselves for promotions, but the data revealed that women were less likely to do so. So senior women at Google now host workshops to encourage women to nominate themselves.
It's what you bring to the table that matters, it's not who you are. And studies have shown that women tend to be far more subdued, even though they are far more thoughtful and accurate. So if management understands the difference between the two, where we don't equate confidence with a behavioral trait, but confidence with their ability to think it through and be accurate and be grounded, then we'll naturally identify such talent and amplify it.
In India, where traditionally fewer women take up technical education, Google is looking at tackling the issue of representative hiring by inculcating a fascination for the job in students.
We do run programs. One of the things that we do is the Anita Bog Scholarship, which we basically invite people in in engineering colleges, women in engineering colleges, to apply for this scholarship, and then we actually invite them to Google. We spend a whole day talking about our technologies, the kind of work we do, and it just kind of motivates them and makes them realize that there are a lot of people who are doing extremely well in IT careers in places like Google. After 5 years of doing this, in engineering colleges, our spread has increased, and we're actually able to reach out to really smart women engineers, and we've been able to hire them, either as interns or as full-time employees.
Apart from the Anita Bog Scholarship, Google also has the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing Conferences and the Google India Women in Engineering Awards to encourage young women to take up careers in technical fields. It's time now for a break on the show, but coming up next we look at why men and women are treated equally in the HCL Tech Employee First strategy. Times are changing. Gen Yers by 2025 will make up 75% of the world's total workforce. And Gen Yers, unlike the baby boomers, work to live and not live to work. Are baby boomers who are heading corporations today cognizant of these attitudinal changes?
It's 8 a.m. Millions of employees show up each day to put their names on a register. You are an employee. Your boss is an employee. Truth is, every employee is a hero. Enough said. Let's go do what we all do best. Let's get to work.
And HCL is one of the few corporations globally that's been this bold about its corporate strategy. Employee first, customer second. The idea is simple. Maximizing personal potential will naturally benefit the corporation, and since the employee is the cornerstone of the business strategy, the talent pool must have the best talent available in the marketplace.
The same mix of men and women that we see in the educational streams or in the community, the mix coming in, applying for jobs is similar. I think the success of any inclusion program revolves around ensuring that key metrics are looked at very regularly. I think leaders take ownership for those measures of success. And I think that is critical.
And Saloni Mangal, an IT sector professional for the last 20 years, has experienced this change firsthand.
Different needs or different responsibilities and roles that a woman has versus what a typical man might be having. So there were some people who obviously understood that and tried and sort of help you around in maintaining a typical work-life balance sort of a thing, but not as focused or not as conscious about it. I would say at least 15 years back. Things have changed, organization as well as people, for the benefit of the organization, because if a person is happy, any colleague for that matter is happy, any gender, is obviously then they'll be able to contribute more at work.
And both Prithvi and Saloni believe this change is easier to handle and execute when it has commitment from the top leadership. And few Indian business leaders have been as candid about their support for diversity and inclusion issues as Vineet Nair. Nair says extraordinary talent comes to a workplace and gets lost because she has to lean back to fit into a mold that was manufactured for a man.
I think attrition is very healthy and well under industry standards for us currently. I'm not sure it is purely because of the programs that we do for our women. I think both men and women recognize that the employee experience at HCL is distinctive. when you have a program like Blogger, which allows people to talk about programs, it builds trust. When they see their managers approving requests for flexi hour, where a woman can actually work from home and actually log in only for about 4.5 hours a day, even though she counts that as a full day of work, they recognize that the company is putting their resources to enable them to do so. And the managers approving that shows that they recognize that the role of the manager is to make the woman successful. And I think that's what helps people become CEOs of their own career.
Well, that's all the time we have on this week's edition of What Women Really Want. But next week on the show, we put the spotlight on the ecosystem for women entrepreneurs in India. Till then, from all of us here on the team, goodbye and many thanks for watching.